No mosque, no Obama. Who's behind the war of anger against that mosque, and who's exploiting the heat of a Washington August to ignite more anti-government fury? Just who are the winners in this assault on Islam and this march of the right in this shadow of Lincoln and King? Is this all about Obama? If all this noise is about the economy and the deficit, why so much heat on the mosque? If it's just the old partisan divide, why do Limbaugh and the others keep bringing it back to race? And finally, Call of the Wild. Could the GOP win a few too many elections this fall and land too many from the far right in Congress? Could they bring themselves down and re-elect Obama just by flying wild with zany candidates? Hi, I'm Chris Matthews. Welcome to this show. With us today, Time Magazine's Joe Klein, the BBC's Katty Kay, NBC's Kelly O'Donnell, and the National Review's Reihan Salam. First up, who's driving all this division in this country right now? What's the motive behind that march on Washington by Glenn Beck and Sarah Palin? And what's the real reason for the uproar over that mosque near Ground Zero? The critics of the mosque are unaccountably wound up. Here's Newt Gingrich playing the Nazi card.
The folks who want to build this mosque, who are really radical Islamists, they're trying to make a case about supremacy. The Nazis don't have the right to put up a sign next to the Holocaust Museum in Washington. We would never accept the Japanese putting up a site next to Pearl Harbor.
So who's the winner in this mosque hysteria? And let's look at Glenn Beck. Who wins from apocalyptic talk like this?
This is about restoring honor in our own selves. We will never fix our country unless we stand in the shadows of Abraham Lincoln and George Washington.
Not one more right will they take from us. Not today, not ever.
What is wrong with us, America? Why are people not in the streets? Your republic is over.
Joe Klein, do you feel this? And by the way, the big question here is the motive behind all this. This is something new. You and I have grown up in American politics. This hysteria, this apocalyptic language from even Newt Gingrich, a guy on the usual suspects list, they're all talking like this now. What's it about?
Newt should be embarrassed, by the way. He's much smarter than this. Glenn Beck, something different. The guy's obviously a paranoid lunatic who is a great entertainer. And he is exploiting something that always happens in our country when the economy is bad and when we're at war. During World War I, if people were caught speaking German in the street, other people would beat them up. During World War II, we interned the Japanese. And now the combination of bad economic times over the last couple of years and the terrorism has led to this wave that Glenn Beck and his puppet master, Rupert Murdoch, are exploiting.
Katty Kay, it's amazing to see a major news organization like Fox, the owner giving $1 million to the Republican Party. I mean, it's sort of out of the closet now. Is this a commercial thing Beck's doing here to raise ratings, to raise money, to just get an audience? I mean, coming to Washington, the whole thing.
Well, I think to some extent, as Joe says, Beck is an extraordinary entertainer and is gripping television. And when he sits there on television and rants like this, or when he speaks to you in these very intimate, fear-mongering tones about how the republic is disappearing, then that raises ratings, it raises his profile. And I think he's appealing to a broader section of the American public that feels that they need to put a check on the administration, and that this is what this is about. And I think if we see a big Republican turnout in November, it's partly going to be not because people are loving Republicans, but they will do anything to check the power that's there.
The apocalyptic language, I mean, Beck goes on telling you, our country's been taken from us. I'm worried. I mean, talking like that, and people are listening.
Well, I've spent time at some of the Tea Party events, and you find a divide within. Those who want to seek out a reporter and say, aren't we just like everybody else? Don't you see that we're mainstream Americans, really trying to validate that their position is not as extreme. And at the same time, a voice like Beck, one of the really kind of vibrant, kind of incendiary characters, they can sort of draft in behind that and relate to it if they wish. But I'm always struck by the divide of those who want to really raise the crazy signs and those who want to say, we have a thoughtful position. I'm really struck by that when I attend those events.
Ryan Salan, this whole thing, I think it gets ethnic, I think it gets tribal. I listened to Rush Limbaugh this week saying, you know, we're not Islamophobic. We elected Barack Obama. That proves we're not Islamophobic. That's saying he's Islamic again when the guy's a Christian.
I don't think that's quite what it's saying. I think what it's saying is that Barack Obama is someone who comes from a very different kind of background, and Americans embraced him in large numbers. I also think the idea, respectfully, that Glenn Beck is, is being controlled by Rupert Murdoch as his puppet master gets things wrong. When you look at Glenn Beck, you see someone, for example, remember Louis Farrakhan of the Million Man March? What was the Million Man March about? A lot of people were terrified about it. It caused a lot of consternation among liberals and conservatives. But ultimately what you saw was an event where tons of African-American men got together, and it was really about identity and pride. And I think that when you're looking at our politics right now, it's true that in an economic downturn, you see a lot of confusion, you see a lot of uncertainty, and there is a decent number of people who feel not like have-nots, but they feel like are-nots. They feel like they're not being respected in our public life, and they want to assert themselves.
Who are the Glenn Beck constituency?
I think that it's a lot of folks. It's a lot of people from smaller cities, rural areas, small towns, tend to be white, tend to be Christian identified.
Who is their villain?
I don't know if they necessarily have a villain so much as there's a lot of confusion and anger and resentment.
The anger is the key here. The one thing that the Million Man March has in common with the Glenn Beck March is anger. And this is the greatest democracy and the most prosperous country in the history of the world. Sooner or later, you got to ask people, what are you so damn angry about?
Anger is what united those men who gathered during the Million Man March. I think
anger at white people, yes.
I'm pretty sure that's not true.
When you say that they're not have-nots, they feel like they are nots. They are not what? They
don't feel
what they see
respected
represented
and
in Washington.
That's certainly a part of it. And also, a lot of these people felt disaffected during the Bush years as well. There was a large number of voters.
They weren't angry, and they weren't speaking out against Washington.
They absolutely were angry, but that anger wasn't part of the narrative. Right now, that anger fits a media narrative, if I may. That's very compelling and exciting for people to talk about, and it fits a lot of preconceived notions.
And where's that media narrative coming from?
It's coming from a lot of folks, including some of the folks around this roundtable, not intentionally, but I think it's the way the prism through which we see the world.
Kelly, when you go out and talk to the people out in the crowds that go to these rallies that are listening to Glenn Beck on the radio, you say some of them are regular people just concerned about taxes and deficits, which everybody is.
Well, they identify themselves that way.
Who is their enemy, though, the people that are more passionate?
Well, I think it's a combination. Certainly you have people who are not supporters of Barack Obama, may not like him, but it may not be the visceral hate toward him in every instance. And you have a sense, I hear it over and over again, about the size of government. These are deeply ingrained, often very Western points of view when you are talking about rural America, where you're talking about people who, whose support for guns is about growing up on a ranch or a farm. It's a different perspective. I think there's more of an urban kind of rural divide in the country.
And some of that anger at government is understandable in a period of 2 years in which we've seen a huge expansion of government.
Let's talk about